All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. Cowboys gearing up for their next matchup. Of course, there's a little bit of news to button up the victory against the New York Jets, and a lot of updates as we get closer, of course, to this Sunday's game. But as we always link to on this channel, get things started. Little stat of the day, a little palate cleanser, if you will. Let's go ahead and pull this up here. This is a chart highlighting defensive splash play rate. Right, it's kind of a metric that's not too popular, but it's interesting. And splash plays, tackle for loss, sack, things like that, right? This is evaluating defensive ends, outside linebackers in terms of how often you create splash plays as a percentage of how many snaps you on the football field. And boy, oh boy, is this a fun graphic, right? So you can see number one, Will Anderson Jr., defensive end for Houston. He's outstanding. Nick Bonito for the Denver Broncos, also outstanding. Number three, James Houston shows up. Who's there at number four, guys? Micah Parsons, right? Houston with an 18.4% splash play rate. Micah Parsons with an 18.2 splash play rate. Now, look, again, I think I said this a couple days ago, and a few people kind of, I don't think seriously took it as, oh, is you saying James Houston is better than Parsons? No. But an argument can be made just on sheer value alone that James Houston's contributions this season, based on how much his salary cap is, based on how much Micah Parsons' salary cap is, based on how much the Packers had to give up for Micah Parsons, then on a value basis, Houston is doing a lot more. And I think that's something important to consider. And this is when the Cowboys were top heavy for so many years, and people, talk about Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, right? All these big name guys, but their depth was non-existent, right? They had a couple stars and a bunch of mediocre, right? And even guys like Parsons, nothing against Parsons, he would have those moments where he would just disappear, right? He wasn't like as much as everyone wanted him to be like the next Lawrence Taylor, he was not Lawrence Taylor, for example. But when you look at the numbers, and then you can kind of realize and take a step back that as good as Parsons is, they're kind of replacing him, right? They're figuring it out. No, again, this defense would be better with Parsons than without. I think that's a guarantee. We all understand that. But when you just look at the numbers and just look at the data, there's a lot of evidence that the Dallas Cowboys, at least offensively with their pass rush, based on what we saw yesterday Sunday, against the New York Jets, they're starting to figure it out a little bit. Now, over the course of a long season, again, there's going to be some duds. There's going to be some good performances. Parsons, being the star player that he is, would have certainly normalized more good performances. But I think at this point, again, this is just what the numbers are saying. And I tell you what, there's no better fan of a graphic like this than Jerry Jones. But it looks like the Cowboys are doing at least okay after the trade. The reports that the defense and the Cowboys' entire locker room franchise, the reports that it was over, right? It was the demise was here in Dallas, obviously were greatly exaggerated. All right, let's get into the news. This is courtesy of John Machota. Cowboys running back Javonte Williams leads the NFC in rushing. Wow. Talk about a steal in the offseason. He's on pace for 1,500 yards and 20 touchdowns. Schottenheimer, Javonte is the bell cow, and he's earned that. We believe in him. Williams, it just feels good for them to trust in me. I love it here. So there's a couple things to focus on, and this is sort of the theme of today's video. The kind of underlying theme is the smart under-the-radar moves that the Cowboys are making, right? And the fact that Schottenheimer after the game says, listen, Williams is our bell cow, right? He's the number one. He's the alpha, right? We're not running back by committee. It's Williams and a supporting cast. That's important, right? Because you look at a guy like Javonte Williams, who's come off some injuries, right? He had a really good season with the Denver Broncos, I believe, in 2021. So he's had flashes of being a good player. But the Cowboys came into the season and it was, well, is it Williams? Is it Sanders? What is Jada Blue? Phil Mava, right? All of these names. And the big assumption going into the season was that it was going to be running back by committee. And while Williams had some good games, and, Sanders had a few moments, the fumble against Philly wasn't great. Williams wasn't perfect, right? He, of course, had the fumble against the Chicago Bears where the ball was shanked out of his hands. Everyone's excited to see Jaden Blue, right? It's one of those things where, the Cowboys even had CeeDee Lamb and Turpin taking handoffs in the running back position. Now, I understand that was more for schematic purposes, but still. But at this point, Schottenheimer's saying, listen, Williams has earned it. He's the number one. We're not running back by committee. That's important because it goes back to the meritocracy element. If you earn the opportunities and earn the position, you'll keep it and you'll get public recognition for it. And that's really important because you're trying to create this culture here. And I think Schottenheimer has been very deliberate about this. Remember when he benched Trayvon Diggs ahead of the Green Bay Packers, right? He said, listen, you're not doing what you need to do in practice. We don't like, there was reports of he got in a shouting match with the coach. None of that's been 100% confirmed, although it seems likely. And so Schottenheimer's like, listen, man, this is the biggest game of the year for you. Packers coming to town primetime. You're benched, right? That's setting a culture message, right? That's one side of the coin. This is the other side. If a guy is playing great, if a guy is doing outstanding, what do? You give him public praise. You elevate him, right? You give the talented people promotions. You give the talented people praise, right? You want to create incentive structures. It sounds so simple, but a lot of coaches screw it up, right? You want to disincentivize bad behavior. Listen, if you step out in the locker room, I don't care if it's a big game against a good opponent, we're benching you. And so you want to disincentivize bad behavior, but you also want to incentivize good performance. If you're exceeding above and beyond expectations, guess what? You're going to get more and more opportunities. We're going to make you the number one, and we're going to publicly praise you, right? And I get it. It's easy in Williams' case because he's playing so good. But it also would be easy to say, listen, we like Jaden Blue still. We're waiting on Phil Maffa. Sanders is a guy we really like, right? He could have done the coach speak thing where he said, Williams is playing great, but, we really like Sanders. We really like all these other guys. He's like, no, Williams is our guy. He's playing awesome, and we're proud that he's here. And it builds trust. It builds those incentive structures that are really important in any organization. Really solid move by Schottenheimer and the Cowboys here. Again, is it anything spectacular? Is it anything that's just going to set the world on fire? Probably isn't really making too many headlines, but it is important. You have to set the incentive structures in place, right? There can't just be a stick, right? A lot of people look for the disciplinarian aspect. They sit there and say, oh, you just need to be tough on players. And you can be, but that's like Matt Patricia when he was the head coach. It's just a stick. You got to apply the carrot, right, as well. If the players do well, if they exceed expectations, reward them. And that's what Schottenheimer's doing here. And it's a good managerial tactic. Good move by the Cowboys. All right, some injury news here, also per John Machota, who is a great follow on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it these days. If you're looking for Cowboys news, he works for The Athletic currently. He posted, going off of what Jerry Jones said on 105.3 The Fan, it sounds like left guard Tyler Smith with his knee, left tackle Tyler Guyton with a concussion, and wide receiver Kevontae Turpin with his foot are the Cowboys with the best chance of returning from injury this week. There's obviously the sort of long-term CeeDee Lamb, Tyler Booker, Cooper Beebe. By all indications, Cooper Beebe is still going to be a little bit more long-term, maybe around the bye, and that's about a month away-ish, but we'll see how things go. Booker and Lamb were trending in a good direction. I thought Booker maybe would have had a decent chance to return this week. I felt Lamb would need at least one more. We'll have to see how it all shakes out, of course. Getting Tyler Smith back in the starting lineup is huge. As much as the backups played great against the Jets and held down the fort, long term that just doesn't work, right? You need your starters to play. You can pull out a game, maybe two with all these backups, but you definitely want to get some starters in there. And I think Tyler Smith, the fact that he was dressed and activated and was sort of available for emergency purposes, that makes me feel pretty good about his chances to play this Sunday. We'll have to see how practice shakes out. Guyton in concussion protocol, I don't know what gate he was in. It's one of those weird things where, there's so many levels and so many things to pass through in concussion protocol. You can be stuck at the first level and never get out of there and be out for weeks or sometimes months, it seems. But you could also get all the way to the very last gate. And, oh my goodness, just didn't have enough time Friday to get cleared, so you can't play. So, that's kind of a weird deal there. But Nate Thomas played well, so it becomes an interesting dilemma with the Cowboys. When it comes to Booker, I don't think there's any reason to rush him back with the way TJ Bass is playing. But, if he can get into action, get some practice under his belt, I think that'd be good. Turpin's an interesting one. I think Turpin's a key part of this offense. I know people look at Flanoy and said he had a big day, and I agree he did. I just don't think that's sustainable to accept Flanoy to have a big day every day. Having Turpin back, if nothing else, as a returner and doing a few things on offense here or there, is just a big part of this team, and it will be a big part of this team going forward. So I think really the two big ones for me are Tyler Smith 1, Turpin 2. If they can get those guys back and ready to go for this upcoming game, that would be fantastic. Guyton, we'll take it either way, but I'm okay with the backup there. And when it comes to Booker and Lamb, I think they're going to keep the slow progress. Things are trending in the right direction. They're certainly not severe. I mean, they didn't put them on IR, so you would expect they would not miss 4 games. If they miss at least 4 games, that's a poor job by the Dallas Cowboys. It's one thing if they game time decision on the 4th game and miss it, but if they aren't ready to practice after 4 games, then it's clearly a mistake by the Cowboys there not putting him on IR. But when you look at Booker, right, he missed what? You're talking about the Packers, and we're talking about the Jets last weekend. Same thing with the CeeDee Lamb. So they still got a game or two to play with. I don't think there's any reason to rush them back this week. I think both of them have a good chance of returning the following week after Panthers, but we'll have to see at practice, right? A lot of things can change. All right, this next report here is courtesy of Patrick Walker at Voice of the Star. On any possible trades, I think we're continually looking, and yes, we'll look to improve our team if we get the opportunity to. Jerry Jones to 105.3 The Fan. He notes as midseason approaches, some teams whose seasons are floundering will start softening up for trades. planning for the future, and that's when things can happen. The deadline is November 4th. The trade deadline is the November 4th. Yeah, I think this is the classic Jerry Jones saying a bunch of things without saying anything, right? It's like, yeah, we're always looking to get better, but we'll have to see what happens, and some teams will soften up, and maybe some teams won't. Maybe we'll soften up, right? It's one of those things. But I think it's an important distinction here to bring about where the Cowboys are now versus where they are or where they've been in prior years with the cap space and the draft capital. So one thing, there was a book written about the Patriots and Bill Belichick, one of about 5,000 of them during their dynasty, talking about how the Patriots, when they had a lot of draft picks one year, Belichick and his staff, they used it as a passport, right? The picks allowed them to go wherever they wanted to go up and down the draft, right? They could go wherever they wanted, acquiring players, acquiring more picks, both in that draft and future drafts. And that's where the Cowboys are right now, right? They've basically got a passport to a bunch of different directions. In prior years, they kind of were like, this is where they are, right? You can maybe sign, one veteran, two veterans, maybe, you got your first round pick, maybe a second round pick, and then third, fourth. Like you don't have a lot of opportunities, right? You can't trade your first round pick because you don't have an option to go make moves in free agency, so you have to hold on to it. You don't have a lot of flexibility. If some team wants to trade, you're kind of stuck, right? If you have an opportunity, you're kind of stuck. And I think the Cowboys right now feel like they have a lot of opportunities. They have that passport. And again, it's one of those under the radar aspects of getting the Micah Parsons trade done and the 2 first-round picks and the draft and then the salary cap space, because it gives you this passport. I mean, people look at it and say, oh, wow, you got 2 more first-round picks. Yeah, that's great. You're going to get good players, 2 more first-rounders. But it also gives you the opportunity when you sit there and look at, say, a third-rounder or a fifth-rounder or something like that. When you only have 1 first-round pick and you don't have a lot of cap space, you hold on to those third and fifth rounders and fourth rounders. Like if you trade them, like that's where the Jonathan Mingo trade, a lot of people are like, oh boy, I feel like that may be a reach, right? Same thing with the Trey Lance trade. They're like, oh, that's tough, right? Because you don't have a lot of cap space. But when you have the cap space and the draft capital, you can be a little more aggressive, right? You can sit there and say, hey, listen, maybe we'll take a shot. Maybe we'll trade something for something here, right? And that's where in prior years the Mingo trade and the Trey Lance trade really kind of stung a little bit. Now, nothing against Mingo. I think he's a decent backup wide receiver, and hopefully he gets back into the fold this week. But I think one of the things that really hurt the Cowboys in years past is they didn't have flexibility. They've got flexibility now. So if you have an opportunity and there's a team that's, for whatever reason, they got to dump a good player, right? And he's a really good player, and he's on a cheap deal. And you're like, we'll float a third rounder for him, right? Why not? Because we got the draft picks, right? If there is, I'm making this up here, but if there is a good veteran safety that's available out there, right? And, he's got 3 years left on his deal, and he's a good player, and he's a good locker room guy. And you just sit there and say, listen, a team's just looking for assets because their season's on the top, just in the tubes, and they're desperate, and they decide to get rid of them. Now you've got the opportunity to trade for them, right? Whereas in years past, you had to hold on to your picks because if you traded away your picks, you had fewer draft picks, and with no cap space, it put you in a tough spot. Now they've got a passport, right? And it's really interesting to see what they're going to do with it. I think they're going to stay pat. But again, they have the opportunity in front of them to make moves if they get the chance, if another team makes a mistake. Like Jimmy Johnson famously said, right? Most of the winning in National Football League is just waiting for the opposition to make a mistake. The Cowboys, for the better part of the last 5-6 years or so, were the team making the mistakes. Now with the draft picks and the cap space, they're the team that can take advantage of mistakes, and just that flip is going to be critical for them going forward. All right, here, let me pull up the next article. This is also per Patrick Walker. Julius Wood, the safety, has been signed to the Cowboys practice squad per the NFL Wire. Wood was a Dallas undrafted free agent in 2024, waived in final cutdowns and claimed by the Titans. But the Eastern Carolina product is back with Malik Hooker on IR, ex-collegiate teammate of rookie third-round pick Siobhan Revel. This is kind of an interesting move here. Do I expect Julius Wood to play a lot? No, of course not, right? You look at Wanye Thomas is kind of holding down one of the safety positions while Hooker is out. And, of course, you've got Donovan Wilson. You got Bell right there as the other backup. So they've got guys. But I do think it's an interesting addition, considering he played safety for Dallas in 2024. Obviously, it was a completely different defense. It was Zimmer versus Eberflus. But they wouldn't bring him into the fold unless they still liked what he did. I think this is something where Eberflus and McClay, they looked at him and they said, listen, he was a good player that we had to let go. Good in the context of being, a potential backup depth piece. If he's available, we can add him to the practice squad. And maybe he's a guy, if we have to elevate due to injuries, we could do a lot worse. So again, just a smart under the radar move. One of the things that teams do that I think is really, really, I think overhyped is when they add veterans mid-season to the practice squad, right? We're talking about guys that played like 4 or 5 years of football. I'm like, oh, what a move. Oh my goodness. We saw it last year when the Cowboys added Dalvin Cook to the practice squad. I think they elevated him for a game or two. It's one of those things where, listen, it's a big name, but they don't really contribute, right? There's a reason they're available, right? These veterans that are available right now, usually that means they have some severe flaws. We've seen this with Clowney, by the way. He has not been bad for Dallas, but he hasn't made a single play, in terms of a sack, tackle for loss, or anything like that. He's got maybe a couple pressures. He's done a few nice things in the run game. Don't get me wrong, he's a good addition. He works with the young guys. But you don't sign a Clowney and oh my goodness, he's going to get 12 sacks, right, in 14 games. That's just not realistic for any veteran you bring into the fold this season. But it draws the media headlines, it draws the attention. Whereas some of these young guys, right, guys like Will McClay knows them, right? They got the scouting rapport on him. They know what he can do, what he can't do. He's a guy that maybe can develop, right? We talk about guys that go from waiver wires to float around for a little bit, find a spot, get an opportunity, and do some good things. So, again, just a smart, under-the-radar move. Don't fall for bringing in a veteran that's 2 years past his prime to be a practice squad guy at the safety position. I know you're banged up, but you already got a veteran, right? You got Malik, right? You got Donovan Wilson, right? You already got veterans. You can make an argument Wanye Thomas is a veteran, right? Because he's been around the ball, 3-4 years now. So this is a situation, bring in a young guy, right? See what happens. And I think it's a smart under-the-radar move for Dallas. That's the theme today. Just good, solid, steady decision-making for the Cowboys. All right, this next tweet that I want to talk about, this is per Ernie the Cowboys fan, which is clearly a Cowboys fan account on X. He noted that Dak Prescott through 5 games has 1,356 passing yards with 10 scores and 3 interceptions. He's on pace for over 4,600 yards with 34 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. He says MVP numbers, #Cowboys. Yeah, I think one of the things I want to highlight here, and I saw this tweet and I wanted to pull it up and talk about it, because if you look at his numbers, his on pace for numbers, they're really good. But are they record setting, right? He's not on pace for 50 touchdowns. He's on pace for 5,000 yards. He's been on pace for that. He's had seasons where he's thrown for more yards. He's had seasons where he was on pace for a lot more, like 2020. 34 touchdowns is a lot, but it's not 50. It's not 45, right? 10 picks. I mean, we'll see what happens over the course of the season, but that's not what was the year when Aaron Rodgers threw 40 touchdowns and 4 picks, and Brady had the year where he went 36 touchdowns, 4 picks or something like that, right? We've seen quarterbacks, getting the 4, 5, 6 interception range when they're winning MVPs, right? Prescott, not his fault on some of those picks, but he's probably going to get in the high single digits, low double digits with interceptions, considering a 17-game season, right? Maybe I'm wrong there. I hope I'm wrong, but I think just the trend, he's on points in that direction. And yet he's still an MVP candidate. Everyone understands that, right? He's one of the favorites right now with guys like Baker Mayfield at the top of the list being MVP caliber guys so far through 5 games. So I think this speaks to really important what the Cowboys coaching have done. And again, it's one of those under-the-radar moves. Prescott is playing like an MVP, but he doesn't have to throw for 300 yards a game. Well, we've talked about Prescott playing at that level in the past, except with the exception being 2016, he's throwing for a lot, right? He's throwing for 350 yards like in 2019 or 400 yards like he did in 2020 before the injury, right? Putting up these monster numbers, these monster games. And I think the fact that Prescott is throwing for under 300 yards significantly per game, right? He's on pace 34 touchdowns. That's a good number, right? Pro Bowl numbers. But these aren't MVP numbers necessarily. These are Pro Bowl numbers. But he's playing like an MVP guy. Why? Because they have a good scheme, right? They have a good strategy. They've got a running game they married with it, right? They've put themselves in a situation where he doesn't have to throw for 350, 400 yards a game. And I think that's important. And again, it's an under-the-radar aspect of what Schottenheimer and the staff has done, right? They've done this marriage of the run game and the pass game to the point where Prescott does not have to throw for 300 a game. Even in prior seasons where they had a good running game, it felt disconnected. It didn't feel like they were, I hate to say it because it's so cliche and everyone's saying it, but it didn't feel like they were linked at the hip. There wasn't a run play that led to a pass play, which led to a run play, which led to a pass play in terms of the scheme, the motion, the shift, formation, personnel, and all that. It just felt like, hey, we got a passing offense and we got a rushing offense, and we kind of just call plays from both of them as we see fit. You're not seeing that with the Cowboys. And because of that, Prescott, I think his volume numbers are going to be a little bit lower because they're going to run the ball more effectively, or at least half through 5 games. And again, it's the little things. It's getting some attention right now, but people really want to just talk about Prescott's performance. But the fact that his numbers are not 350 yards a game passing like we've seen in years past, and people still see him as an MVP candidate, that to me is another indication of Schottenheimer and Adams and this scheme Coaching matters once again, guys. All right, this next report is courtesy of John Machota. Former Cowboys running back Rico Dowdle said Dallas defenders need to buckle up this Sunday. Dowdle had some comments after the Panthers' recent victory against the Miami Dolphins, where Dowdle had an awesome game, career game by far, over 200 yards on the ground. Said he's excited to play Dallas. They said the defenders need to buckle up. The Cowboys kept Rico Dowdle, around for 5 years. That tells you something. He's a good player. Obviously had a good season last year down the stretch. Cowboys coach Brian Schottenheimer, we're going to bring our seatbelts, Rico. We'll buckle up. I kind of love how Schottenheimer here, and again, it goes back to the theme, just a little under the radar thing. He doesn't ignore it, but he doesn't take it too seriously, right? I think coaches, they fall into two extremes, right? They sit there and ignore. They're just like, yeah, we don't care what a player says, right? Which, I mean, you obviously do. Everyone does, right? Just even if you don't publicly say it at a visceral level, just at a lower human level, you're like, hey, I don't like a player calling me out, or I don't like what a player of the opposition is saying, right? We don't like that, right? If we get that as fans, right? We don't like if the Philadelphia Eagles fan across the bar just says something, even if it's not totally mean or silly. You're just like, I don't like the way you said that over there, right? It's just a human reaction. The other extreme, right, what you get from coaching is they steer too much into it. They're like, well, we'll send them a message. We're ready. We'll deliver a punch. Come on, right? You're going over the top here. You're writing checks for someone else to cash, right? Calm down a little bit. Schottenheimer's approach is sort of funny. It's whimsical. It's like, yeah, Rico, we know. We're going to bring our seatbelts. We're going to buckle up. Okay. All right. We'll see you on Sunday, right? Let's get through this. And I think that's a good message to take. It's sort of a steady hand, right? Schottenheimer's an energetic guy. He's a very emotional guy at times. He does a good job connecting with his players. He can be a disciplinarian too. We saw it when he benched Trayvon Diggs. He's made some tough roster moves, right? He's made some changes, things like that, some tough cuts that weren't necessarily expected from the fan base after training camp. But he's also a guy that doesn't take it too seriously in terms of these little things. He's got clarity of purpose. He's focused on the process and the system and building the program, right? And these little things like this, right? It doesn't sound like a huge deal, but as a coach, if you're trying to sell to your players, listen, we're just trying to get better each and every week, go through the process, figure out who our better players are, improve. If you look at a comment from Rico Dowdle here and you overreact to it, you're just sending a message to your players that, okay, the system thing doesn't matter. Coach is just emotional. All he cares about is this week. Or at the same time, if you don't care at all, you completely dismiss it, then the players are like, okay, coach just isn't paying attention. He's aloof, right? So it's a tough middle ground to find here, right? It sounds silly and sounds dumb, but I've been on teams, right, at the collegiate level where coaches were kind of like this, right? They were, some assistant coaches, some head coaches sometimes. You'd be like, you got to pay attention to this, man. Or, hey, man, you're focusing way too much on this. You're distracting from what we're trying to do today. Schottenheimer, again, a good job finding that nice fine line and living in it. All right, this next report I wanted to bring up, it's sort of old news, but I think it's important. So this was from a few months ago, or I guess right before the season started. The NFL Twitter account posted, Eagles are trading for running back Tank Bigsby from the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars received 5th and 6th round picks. And I'm bringing this up just to highlight this because I saw this on social media that Bigsby has not had a single carry yet for the Philadelphia Eagles this season. And look, this Eagles offense has been, as anyone has watched Philadelphia at all, has been kind of disappointing from their perspective. It hasn't been as efficient or as productive as they'd like in the run game or pass game. And I think this is important because when the Eagles and Roseman, their GM, who's a really good GM, he's outstanding, right? I'm not trying to be critical of him or not. He's a great GM. But they made this trade. They said, here we go. Roseman, he's always making the deals, always looking to get better. And we'll see what happens with Bigsby. Maybe he gets a lot of playing time and maybe he plays great. And he certainly might. He has the talent. But so far through 5 games or 4 games with Philadelphia, he's done nothing. And you traded away a 5th and a 6th for no production. And again, you're not, it's not like he's, it's not like you're in a situation with the Eagles where you're trying to develop a young team, right? They're obviously in win-now mode. So when you trade for a veteran in win-now mode, you expect for him to play. And he hasn't played or been productive at all. We'll see how this trade shakes out. It could work out great for Philly. Bigsby could have big moments down the stretch. He could become a star for him. Certainly could. But at this point, the Eagles traded a 5th and 6th round pick for nothing. And I think that's important because some of these guys, some of these GMs that get a lot of publicity and a lot of hype for being great GMs, a lot of them have a lot of duds. And a lot of them just make deals just to make deals. And that's not always, in fact, very rarely is that a recipe for success, right? Over the long term. The Eagles have some long-term salary cap struggles. So they're going to need a lot of draft picks. Now, a 5th and 6th round pick isn't huge. Like missing that's not going to break the bank. But you have to have that view if you're a team, right? You have to understand your situation. Roseman, he's a great GM. He's made a lot of great deals, but he's a wheeler dealer. That's how he likes to live. And right here, it looks like he may have made a mistake, potentially. Again, we'll see what happens. But I think when people clamor for the Dallas Cowboys, circling back to Dallas here, well, they need to make a trade. They need to make a deal. They need to do something, do something, do something. Would you trade a 5th and a 6th round pick for no production, for nothing? I wouldn't. Right? Now, look, I know the Cowboys have done it in the past, right? So people say, well, what about this? What about that? I get it. That doesn't mean it was a good trade then. It doesn't mean it'd be a good trade now. Just because a good team does something like the Eagles with Bigsby doesn't necessarily mean it's a good strategy, right? You try and copy and mimic the good strategies from good teams. I think at the time, the Eagles, for whatever reason, felt like they could get a lot of value from Bigsby, and maybe they will. But right now, the Dallas Cowboys, they've got the passport that I mentioned before. And while everyone's clamoring for them to maybe make a big trade, make a big move, oh my goodness, maybe they can do something this year, stick to the plan, stick to the process. That's my goal. That's my hope for Dallas. All right, let's get into the comments. We'll get started as we always do with member comments. Greatly appreciate our members. Like I always say, if you want to make sure your voice is always heard, become a member. It's a way to support the channel. I greatly appreciate all of our members who do support me. In return, I will always address every member comment. I will address the member comments first before I get to any non-member comments. And I don't have time to get to all the non-member comments as a whole, so I'm going to have to pick and choose which ones. So if you want to make sure you get heard, become a member. It would mean a lot to me. I greatly appreciate it. All right, let's get started with Plague Doctor, regular commenter. Said Shamar James definitely did his job. Taking good angles and playing within the scheme are things you want a rookie to do. He's not been flashy. People really don't need that flashy home run guy. We already have that in Overshown and Leofau. You want a rookie to get his feet under him first. When they have the basics and tempo of the league down, they can be more proactive. It's a good sign he isn't trying to do too much. Yeah, I think this is in response to the comments I made yesterday where Shamar James, 15 tackles, had a solid game. Not a perfect game, but a solid game. And some of these analytics people in the media were like, well, a lot of them were tackles and coverage, and it really wasn't that good of a game or whatever. But if you actually watched the film and watched how he played, and you hit this right on the head, couldn't have said it better myself, he played within the scheme. He played within himself. Didn't try and do too much, right? You're winning, right? You're ahead in the second half on the road, right? Don't do anything stupid. Don't try and be a hero. Do your job. Do your job and do it well. And he did that, right? And that should be commended. And you bring up a great point that the Cowboys, they don't need a home run hitter. They don't need a guy playing, trying to just go crazy and force takeaways and turnovers and maybe give up big plays. They already got that in Leofau, and they'll have that again in Overshown. They need a more steady hand, a guy who just does his job, flies to the football, and makes a tackle. That's Shamar James against the New York Jets. Now, he's got to do better against the run, right? But listen, it was a weird game plan the Cowboys had. Again, they're so focused on not giving up big pass plays and containing Justin Fields. They never had the numbers inside. It was one of those things where they just didn't have the bodies. And part of that was poor play by the defense, but part of that was the scheme. And listen, going forward against the Carolina Panthers, we'll have to see what they do, of course. But I think Shamar James, he had a good game. I think that's a very easy thing to say. For whatever reason, people don't like saying it. I think there's a lot of people out there that just want to be contrarian, but this is a great comment. Yeah, you don't want him to do too much. Figure out the game. It's like a rookie quarterback, right? It's this weird thing where we look at how a rookie quarterback, how we want him to play. We always say, listen, take what the defense gives you, avoid the big mistakes, stay ahead of the chains, right? All that kind of stuff. Throw on time, on schedule, execute the offense. Everyone talks about this is what a rookie quarterback should do. But when you get outside the quarterback position, suddenly the expectations for a rookie completely change. Right, we want to sit there and say, well, if you're a rookie linebacker, oh, you better get sacks and takeaways. You better be a superstar. No, it's the same idea, guys. Just like a rookie quarterback, take what the defense gives you, execute the offense, avoid the big mistakes. Rookie linebacker, do your job, right? Don't give up the big play, avoid the big mistakes, make the tackle, right? Those kind of things. That's what matters for rookie players, and then you can evolve from there. Agree, 100%. Good comment. All right, this next one is from Chris Oldham. Analytics are better. Analytical analysis to seize on a single piece of data and says it proves something is not analysis. Context is required to understand the magnitude of a single data point. Exactly. Putting the onus on one player, James, as the reason for the 8 yards attempt is ludicrous without understanding the scheme and personnel involved, the context. Case in point, Dak Prescott versus the Jets had a middling completion percentage. Very true. Substandard total yardage compared to current league norms. Also true. Yet is being regarded as playing at an MVP caliber level. The missing piece is the context. We as Cowboys fans need to understand the context behind information we read on social media or hear from talking heads in sports media before sounding an alarm. This is a young, injury-stricken squad with a multitude of very talented and experienced players, producing a truly entertaining brand of football. They are fun to watch again for the first time in many, many years. Temper your expectations, look into the context behind the numbers, enjoy a really exciting football team blossom before your eyes. Yeah, this is, I could not have said this better myself. This is absolutely perfect. I do think you bring up a great point about context and the numbers, and this is my beef with a lot of the analytics stuff. And as I said the other day, right, I'm not against analytics. I start every show with the stat of the day, for God's sakes, right? I talk about it all the time. But if you don't include the context, if you don't, when you actually are evaluating a player and trying to decide if a player is good or not, if you don't include the context and you don't watch the game objectively, then you're missing the whole point, right? If you don't understand the game plan, right? If you don't understand what you were trying to do in the situation, it's one of those things. If you look at the Cowboys defense, for example, if you just took away all context, you would say, wow, they really fell apart in the fourth quarter, right? Boy, they played great for 3 quarters and collapsed in the fourth. But of course, we all understand how football works. You're up by 24 points in the fourth quarter. You get into soft zone coverage, allow them to dink and dunk it. Listen, if they execute, if they don't fumble or throw an interception, they're going to get some garbage time scores, right? Every team does that. Dallas has done that, historically, right? Every team does on both sides of the coin, right? That's just how it works. Right, the one exception may be the 2023 Cowboys with Deron Bland in that pass rush, where when teams got in garbage time mode, they actually would end up giving more points to Dallas. But that's another discussion. This is common, right? But if you don't understand the context of it, you'll miss everything. Getting that is really important. This is a really good comment. 2 for 2 with good comments here to start the day, guys. Awesome stuff. All right, David Dobbins, 5887, commented, every game you win with Quincy Carter is a jewel. They even went to the playoffs. Talking about the 2003 10-6 squad. Boy, that was an interesting year, right? Because they basically went to the postseason on the back of an easy schedule, a feisty defense, and Bill Parcells basically pushing the team across the finish line. Because they were not a good football team, guys. That was not you can tell they got blown out by Miami. They needed blown out by Philadelphia, blown out by the Atlanta Falcons, lost an ugly game to the New Orleans Saints, right? Shut out by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was one of those seasons where they were far from an elite team. They played a lot of bad teams, and they handled business, and they got the job done, right? They played, Washington twice. They were able to get 2 wins there. You look at, of course, they beat the Lions and the Jets come to mind. They beat the Bills in an ugly game. They got shut out by the Patriots. I forgot that. So this is a team that got shut out twice, right? This was not a great team, and they only scored 7 against the Saints in the season finale. But they found the way to win on the back of Parcells. They found a way to win on the back of just guts and feistiness, and that's sometimes what it takes. But it's important to understand the caveat there is that eventually you need the talent, right? On great guts and execution, right? That Vince Lombardi of, we're just going to run these plays, and we're going to run them better than anybody else, and have just this great execution mindset. If you don't have the talent, your ceiling is 10 wins and you get waxed in the wild card round, right? You got to get the talent. You need both. You need coaching, scheme, and talent. And by coaching, I'm going to say culture, right, and attitude. You need the attitude, you need the scheme, you need the talent. And Dallas in 2003 didn't have the talent, didn't have the scheme, at least offensively. Defensively, they would shift to a 3-4 in a couple years, and things got a little bit better in terms of long-term sustainability. I know it was a good defense, but Parcells wanted to run a 3-4, but they had the execution, and things just worked out with an easier schedule. But that's the ceiling, right? You need all 3 facets to actually be a legitimate contender. Dave went on to say, more playing time for Maris, James, Houston, and everyone praising Eberflus. Most of us have been yelling for these players since day one. Don't get me wrong, I think he's a great defensive coach scheme-wise, but his now decision-making has always been suspect, and his talent evaluation here is garbage. I did like Mingo over Flanoy. I'm a believer now. Blue disappointed, but he is a late rounder. You definitely changed my one reservation on James. Edit the second half. That was obviously an exclusive club training camp, LOL. Yeah, it's like I talked about a second ago, you have to take for a grain of salt. Once the game gets out of whack in the fourth quarter, and it's a blowout, you get some numbers get padded, right? Completions happen, right? It's just I think Justin Fields ended up with 240 yards passing, right? Because if you walked away from that game, you're like, oh, Justin Fields, he had a decent little passing performance, when through 3 quarters he had almost nothing. So it's one of those things where garbage time stat padding can really inflate things one way or the other. Again, that's where you take stats without context. Look, the running game in between the tackles was very poor. But like I said a second ago, and I've said 500 times at this point, they basically said, listen, we're going to contain Justin Fields. We're going to stop the big plays offensively throwing the football because, number one, big plays down the field throwing the football have killed this defense. Number two, the Jets, how they survive and really score a lot of points, or can, is when Justin Fields breaks contain and creates big plays just with his athleticism. So Eberflus came into the game saying, listen, those are the two things we got to do. And so you get a little bit lighter boxes. And Breece Hall's a good running back, and the Jets is a good run blocking offensive line, and the Cowboys front in those situations didn't have good numbers, and they didn't play great, right, if we're being totally honest. And I think this is, listen, not every game is perfect. There's always going to be flaws. There's always going to be warts, always things to improve on. The other team's got a fight, too. They've got to say as well, right? This is the NFL. Even a winless team like the Jets, they've got talent, right? They've got a good run blocking O-line. Breece Hall's a good running back. Fields is an athlete. Wilson is a stud receiver. They got studs on that defense, right? Like, it's one of those things where people look at a winless team and you're just like, oh, they're terrible. Guys, a winless NFL team, 99 times out of 100, they'll have a lot of studs. They'll have a lot of players. Like, there's like 5 guys on the Jets that I wish the Dallas Cowboys had, right? Obviously, salary cap restrictions kind of make it hard, but that's just the reality. And I think when you look at any sort of performance and try and look at individual warts, I think it's important because you want to say like, hey, we need to improve here. But let's not lose the forest through the trees, right? The context matters. The scheme, the game plan matters. And there's a lot of good things to take away. A lot of things to improve on as well. But I think, look, it's a National Football League. You're never going to play a perfect game. Not even close. All right, this next comment is from Dino Lachey 9397. Very good show on Shamar James. I put up his numbers hours after the game and only 2 games as a non-starter to juxtapose Sanborn's play. I was disagreeing with another Cowboy content creator trying to show how James is more athletic, fast, and finishes tackles. My point is he should be out there over Sanborn, and yes, I have eyes and see how much better he is over Sanborn. I've been screaming for him since the Giants game, and I hope Eberflus' eyes have been open as well. Go Cowboys. Well, I think the one thing will be is can he call the defense, can he line up and do that consistently, and take that next step, right? That's going to be a key part. They were giving him more playing time in passing situations against the Giants, which I think was smart. 'Cause it's one of those things, people were like crapping on Shamar James because he was making a lot of tackles and coverage. I remember Sanborn in a lot of those situations, certainly the first chunk of the season, and even at times against Green Bay, he was such a liability that he wasn't making those tackles, right? So a team would throw a short pass, like a 6-7 yard check down, or he'd get beat in that zone coverage and give up a big play or give up at least a little chunk play, and Shamar James doesn't, and people are like, well, that's a bad play by Shamar James. It's like, well, no, that's clearly an upgrade. That's why he's playing more. And look, he's a good blitzer too. He adds that element. We'll have to see what he does against the run. It's going to be a process, guys. It's going to take some time, but I think he's definitely an exciting rookie who's going to develop. And that's, again, I think that was said earlier by Chris in the comment section, right, where you've got an exciting young team. You've got guys that are like appearing for the first time. Ezraku flying around. Just did a film review of him yesterday. Check it out if you haven't seen it yet. Right? He's getting better and better. You look at Shamar James, right? You look at, all these young guys that are just flying around being playmakers on both sides of the football for the first time in a long time, right? It's no longer just, well, what can these veteran stars do in Dallas? Can they live up to their talent? Now it's like, who are these young guys flying around making plays? And when you play young guys, you're going to get a lot of volatility. We've seen it thus far, but it makes them a very exciting bunch, and I think they'll get better and continue to develop with these opportunities. 803 Mafia commented, the future is bright for Dallas as long as we keep trending up. I'm glad we went from a win-now approach and back to a team philosophy. We could still make some noise this season, though. Yeah, it's one of those things where if you're always in win-now, you're kind of never in win-now. And I feel like the Cowboys have been in win-now mode since 2017, I feel like, every single season. Now, obviously, the injury in 2020 to Prescott in 2024, although that season was going south anyway, kind of derailed those 2 years. But they've been in win-now mode for like a decade. And if you're always in win now, you're also kind of never in win now because you're never in a situation where, you can ever reload and recalibrate the talent in your team. So it's one of those things. You want to go, ideally as a team, like a 2-3 year window, win now, and then recycle, and then another win now, and then recycle, and then another win now, right? And you want to kind of make sure your win now teams are great and your recycle teams are still solid and competitive, right? That's ideal. But I think for a long time, the Cowboys were such a heavy win now mode, and we kind of saw it last year. We're seeing it so far this year a little bit too. Is that all their veteran talent, Smith, Martin, right? Lawrence, right? Parsons gone as well, of course, via the trade, and a bunch of other veteran guys as well. Over time, they just kind of they age out, they get old, right? They're not the same player, and suddenly you wake up because you've been in win now mode for so long. You're like, crap, right? We got a depth and talent base issue, and they still do. But at least they're young and exciting at some of these positions. And I think that's a good sign. And it makes them fun to watch because you're like, hey, what will Ezraku do here? Hey, what will Shamar James do here? What the heck's Wanye Thomas going to do? What's Jaden Blue going to do? What's Nathan Thomas, Tyler Guyton, Tyler Booker? What the heck are these guys going to do? Cooper Beebe, Hoffman.
what are these guys? Flanoy, what are these guys all about, right? It definitely makes it more interesting. Now, if you're this young, it kind of puts it inserts a lot of volatility, like I said, but I do think it makes them fun, exciting, and gives them a clear path for the future. All right, a couple more comments here. This next one is from Thomas FM6TT. Shawnee first said when he became head coach that he wanted to marry the run game and pass game, and he's doing just that and having a great response from the players, and they're going to get better. Boy, I mean, everything he said, like when he talked about in the press conference, this is what we're going to do, and so far they've done it. Again, it's a good move, right? It's a good job. All right, Stanley Moten, 9466. Been a while since I called out Stanley. Thank you for the comment, Stanley. I think I've probably missed you a few times. That's the first thing they say, living in the past. I love that they recognize that past and acknowledging the past, especially for fans that go back to the Landry era. Yes, his offenses used a lot of motion and shifts. Landry ran the offense and defense, and teams today are still using his defense and offense. Of course, he invented the 4-3. He brought the shotgun back and popularized it. A lot of these trick plays, these flea flickers, that's Landry, right? You look at the third down back, right? The idea of a third round back. That started with Preston Pearson in the mid-1970s, working out of those shotgun formations, right? He kind of brought that to the forefront. The modern middle linebacker position, Landry did that with the Giants in the 1950s with Sam Huff. I mean, you can go on and on and on. Already talked about shifts and motions, right? Things like that. A gap-minded defense, right? That was the flex defense. That was a big part of that. So it's one of those things, and there's a bunch of other things as well, where so much of modern football is tied to Tom Landry and the success he had with the New York Giants as their defensive coordinator and with their Dallas Cowboys as a head coach, right? So it's just so many things that can literally that we see in the National Football League today that are tied to Dallas. And I really appreciate that the Cowboys, at least in this situation with the Landry shift at kneel downs, give the call back to it because it's so important, because there's a lot of fans out there and a lot of people out there that don't realize that about 80% of what you see, really, so the NFL looks like this today. It's about 60-70% Landry and about 30% Bill Walsh and about 10% Paul Brown, right? I think I'm being maybe a little biased there. Some people may give Walsh more credit with the West Coast offense and his passing concepts, but I think that's what the NFL is. If you turn on the NFL today, 99% of what you see is those three guys, right? Weight it however you want, and I love how the Cowboys always give the call back to that. I think it's a nice touch. All right, BMR Collects commented, even though the defense played a little bit better against the Jets, I hope they continue playing all the young guys like Ezraku, Leofau, et cetera, et cetera. These reps are valuable and could pay off real soon. I mean, Leofau earns it as a playmaker. I mean, he's a thrill a minute, right? He'll get you a tackle for loss. He'll blow up a blocker, humiliate him, and then he'll miss 2 tackles. He'll just absolutely eviscerate someone in the punt return game and have just an incredible punch out like he did against the Jets, and then totally just whiff on a tackle, right? He is a thrill a minute. He's a playmaker. He plays with a lot of energy. I kind of like it. It's frustrating at times, but it's a nice element. Shamar James, Ezraku, I agree. Like, these young guys certainly make it entertaining, and they definitely need the reps. All right, and finally here we've got Atkins, Michael. If we can add pieces to the defense this year, Cowboys will go far. Yeah, I don't think they should, right? They could, and if the opportunity is there to take advantage of a team doing something stupid, absolutely. But I don't think the framing from the Cowboys front office perspective is like, man, we just need to add one linebacker or one safety or another pass rusher. They already added Clowney, guys. Overshown's going to come back at some point. Revel will come into the fold and start getting some playing time eventually, right? So they've got guys that are coming back into this roster, into this team on defense to get more opportunities, more playing time. Kenny Clark is still relatively new here, right? So I don't want to disrupt any of that, right? If the opportunity is there and you can get a steal, perfect. Take advantage of it. But if it's not a steal, wait off, go through the season, figure out who can play, who can't, and then recalibrate for 2026. All right, that's enough of the comments for today. Really good comments across the board, guys. I mean, you guys do an awesome job with the comments. I really appreciate it. But we're now in the middle of preparation, right? Obviously, the NFL week on a week-by-week basis goes through this weird cycle where obviously, you have the game, and a few days after the game, you got some news, maybe some roster moves. There's been some big roster moves around the National Football League. But then you get into the preparation, right? And this is where it really matters. The injuries, who's healthy, your scheme, implementing the game plan. The Cowboys have been good at implementing and coming up with game plans for the most part for the first few weeks, and they'll have a challenge this upcoming weekend against a very feisty, very just mercurial Carolina Panthers team who will, they can beat someone 30-0 and they can lose 40-13, right? You have no idea what you're going to get on a play-by-play, game-by-game, snap-by-snap, half-by-half basis with this Panther squad. So you got to be ready for anything. Big challenge, of course, for the Dallas Cowboys, trying to get healthy on top of everything else. So we'll see what they do, right? It's an exciting time, and we'll cover that news as always. But until tomorrow, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.